So this is the beginning of a 2-week series today called IQ EQ. And it's based on a book by Daniel Goleman called Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. And of course, we're going to look at what the Bible has to say about our emotional lives. You know that IQ stands for intelligence quotient, and it used to be the standard some decades ago for measuring people's intelligence, not so much anymore. And so you would get out the number 2 pencil and fill in the bubbles, and you know how this works. If X is greater than Y and a train leaves for Huma at 5:10, what's the hypotenuse of a right triangle? And you try to figure that out. It's the hypotenuse is its longest side, actually. Anyway, moving on. So you know what IQ means, and the idea of emotional intelligence is that perhaps emotional intelligence is more important to success in life than an IQ. That's Goleman's proposal. And here's what emotional intelligence means if you look at the screen. To be emotionally intelligent means 5 things, 5 abilities. And we're going to cover 3 today and 2 next week. First, to be aware of your emotions, to have awareness of how you're feeling and why. Second, to manage your emotions. 3, to motivate yourself with positive emotion. That has to do with behavior. What do I do in life? And not just your job, but all actions. How I conduct myself every day. To motivate myself with positive emotion. To be able to empathize with other people. And to relate to other people, connect with them in a healthy way. And again, Goleman's point is that potentially EQ is a greater predictor of success in life than IQ. If you think about people you know, how many people do you know who are really smart, but they have a hard time relating with people? And which one is more important in life? If you have 2 people applying for a job, one is turning in a resume cold without knowing anybody, and the other person knows the person doing the hiring. Which one has the better shot at getting the job? Because it's all who you know, and knowing people is about networking. Networking requires emotional intelligence. If it just comes down to making money, making more money, if that's somebody's goal, I want to make more money in life. Well, if one person has all kinds of knowledge, but a low emotional intelligence, and another person has the same amount of knowledge, but a really high IQ, who's going to be more successful, or EQ, who's going to be more successful in life? People with the high EQ are going to have longer business relationships with folks. They just get along with people better. Employers and coworkers are going to enjoy having them around more because they're just easier to get along with. They're just better for the job environment. People with a high EQ understand that every business is the people business. And of course, that's going to lead to more success in life. Think about the most brilliant person you can imagine, an astrophysicist who can write math equations that take up the entire chalkboard. Without EQ, an astrophysicist is an outcast in his field. He can't get along with his peers in order to get a positive peer review of his work or to get his work published. His findings are secret. He's a brilliant outcast without having an EQ. So if that's true for an astrophysicist, what does that say about a marriage? Or about friendships? Or just relationships with coworkers and friends and family in our everyday lives? A high EQ can get a person a long way in life. When I was 16, I connected with a little Baptist church back in the Midwest, and I was actually baptized there at 16. And the pastor's name was Fred. Fred was a great guy. In this particular church, they did not value formal education. Just that brand of Baptist theology. And so the pastors were not required to have a college education or a seminary education. And Fred, the truth is, would not have done very well on a standard IQ test. He had a church of about 150 people, which is about the number that one pastor can handle relationally. And when you walked in on Sunday morning, however, Fred was always there to greet every single person with a handshake. You would see Fred, he had this really deep voice. So before you ever see him, you'd hear him, "How are you this morning?" You know, and you hear the back slapping going on, and he would just engulf your hand when you walked in. How you doing? Put his hand on your shoulder. How you doing today? And he really wanted to know the answer. He would greet everybody by name and shake their hands if you were going through something difficult in life. Fred would look at you with sincerity and with empathy and say, how you holding up? And people would talk. You'd see people crying right in the entrance because Fred got to them. And he just comforted people and loved people. He would not have scored very well on a traditional IQ test, but his EQ score would have made smoke come out of the machine. It got him a very long way in life, his high EQ. Every time I've met with a married couple who was struggling in their relationship, they had a reasonably high IQ. They were both intelligent people, but the problems stemmed from the fact that maybe both, shared the blame, or however that works. There's usually, some kind of shared responsibility, but their EQ was lower than their IQ. In order to negotiate and work through conflict requires a high EQ. And so many problems that we experience, whether it's a marriage or friendships or people in church, relationships with people in church, a lot of those, if not all of them, go back to emotional intelligence. And it's true that everybody could stand to raise our EQ. Nobody has arrived in this particular area. There is no such thing as saying, well, I'm there and now I'm done. But everybody could stand to raise their EQ. And I think this is biblical as well. We're going to look at a scripture here in a moment from the book of Galatians, chapter 5. And the Apostle Paul wrote this letter to the Galatians. He traveled around the Roman Empire teaching about Jesus. And then he would write letters to the people he had already visited or people who were close to them, encouraging them in their spiritual lives. And he wrote a letter to people living in the province of Galatia that is now in central Turkey. If you've been following the story about the mine in Soma, Turkey, have you seen that in the news? Galatia is about 300 miles away from that. That mine, by the way, is really close to a lot of biblical cities. Cities in Revelation, the city of Ephesus. It's just incredible how biblical that land is. But Galatia was about 300 miles away, and the letter to the Galatians is about freedom in your spiritual life. There were some people who were teaching that in order to experience a vibrant spiritual life, you had to observe very strict religious laws. And it was by this strict observance that you could attain this level of freedom in your spiritual life. And Paul disagreed. He said that a vibrant spiritual life comes from a heart relationship. And he used the phrase, walking with the Spirit. Walking with the Spirit of God, keeping in step with the Spirit. And then he gave a list of 9 qualities that are the results of walking with the Spirit. And this is an agricultural society, so the idiom there was the fruit of the Spirit. The results, the fruit, what comes out of your walk with the Spirit. And here they are in Galatians 5:22 through 23, the fruit of the Spirit. Paul writes, but the fruit of the Spirit, the results of walking with God's Spirit in your life, are love, joy, peace, patience. Pretty good list so far, right? Kindness. Are you still with me? That was a really long sermon intro. Are you still with me? Are we good? I'm trying to be emotionally intelligent and gauge how you do. Okay. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. Oh, how important is kindness? And how hard is kindness sometimes? Goodness, faithfulness. What a great word, faithfulness. Gentleness. And here it comes. Self-control. The results of walking with the Spirit of God in your life are these qualities. Against such things, there is no law. Paul's like, you can't get to these qualities by following rules or observing strict religious laws. And anyway, it doesn't matter, because if you can live such a life where these qualities are coming out of you, you're already fulfilling the rules. Whatever the rules or the laws required from you, if you're living this kind of a life, you're already living up to the laws. So concentrate on walking with the Spirit. So here are the fruit of the Spirit, and then you remember that list of 5 things in emotional intelligence, right? So here's my question. What fruit of the Spirit here does not require emotional intelligence? Being aware of our emotions, managing them, motivating ourselves to be better people with positive emotion. empathizing with others, being able to connect in relationships with other people. What in this list does not require emotional intelligence? Are you with me? I would go ahead and argue every single one of them. And one of the points of frustration for people who grow up in church and they read the Bible, and especially if they go to high-octane, high-powered churches where they're told to do this and that, is that the approach of the Bible is largely behavioral. Meaning, Scripture will say, do this, don't do this. You know what I mean? And sometimes that can be maddeningly frustrating because you're like, how do I do this? Love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, great. How? You know what I mean? I'm the only person who's ever been frustrated by this. How, God, do I do this? I want to. I agree, but how do I do this? The Bible is largely behavioral. Where I'm serious is, I think there's something to be said with the way to walk with the Spirit, to keep in step with the Spirit, is to try to raise my EQ. And that could be kind of a discipleship path for me. That by working on raising my emotional intelligence, that would actually be synonymous with walking with the Spirit. That's where we're headed in this series. This is the how, possibly, for how I could walk with the Spirit of God and grow in my relationship with God. So, if you'd like to keep notes, we're going to cover 3 of the 5 abilities in emotional intelligence today. The first one is awareness. Goleman writes, self-awareness, recognizing a feeling as it happens, is the keystone of emotional intelligence. The ability to monitor feelings from moment to moment is crucial to psychological insight and self-understanding. People with greater certainty about their feelings are better pilots of their lives. Are you praying for guidance about a decision? Watch how this quote ends. Having a surer sense of how they really feel about personal decisions, from whom to marry to what job to take. Goleman suggests that having a higher EQ can make those hard decisions easier because you just know in your gut who you are and how you feel, and you have a better sense of what is best in the situation. What if praying for guidance involved EQ? Every Sunday morning, we set up equipment here at 8 a.m. We have an amazing team and who does that we really are proud of, and we love you and appreciate you. And a few weeks ago, before I showed up here at 8 to set up, I stopped at a gas station to pick up some coffee, which I know I just lost my Starbucks snob card by admitting that. I picked up gas station coffee. But I picked up coffee, and then I was getting ready to pay for it, and somebody came from the drink area holding a cup in one hand and a lid in the other. And I think it was a red lid. And the person interrupted the cashiers and the people they were, relating to, and the person indignantly, angrily said, "This isn't the right lid." Like, that's a major crisis point, apparently, in this Sunday morning routine. A cup in one hand, a red lid in the other. This isn't the right lid. And one of the cashiers stopped and was stunned and turned around, and you just kind of saw a pause. Maybe the person's joking. And, well, if they're not joking, okay, so and the cashier said, well, the right lid for that cup is a green lid. And the person's going, ugh, and turned around and headed back. Now, this is why the cashier was stunned. Yes, I went back and took a picture of the lids. Here's why the cashier was stunned. So, the lids are color-coded according to the cup. Green lid, green cup. The lids are color-coded, number one. You probably can't see this on the screen. Not only are they color-coded, there's actually a label underneath each lid telling you which cup that goes on. So we've all done embarrassing things, like we've all been busy. The only thing missing here is a monkey that puts the lid on the cup for you. And so our question would be how would a person miss the, 100 green lids that are color-coded and labeled according to what cup they fit on? Well, a person who is unaware, talking about awareness, being aware of your emotions, a person who is unaware of our emotions is kind of like the person who missed the 100 green lids. Again, we all have had these days, and we can all identify with this, but Being unaware of our emotions is kind of like missing the 100 green lids because our emotions are always there, are they not? Whether we're aware of them or not, have you ever heard anybody say, I'm really not an emotional person? Is that true? Wouldn't it be true that all human beings are emotional people? And if somebody says, oh, I'm not really an emotional person, what they really mean is, I don't express my emotion. I'm not aware of my emotion, which could be maddening for the people who love them the most. I'm not an emotional person. Well, every person is an emotional person. Our emotions are always there. As a matter of fact, they are closer to us than 100 green lids. They're here. They're always with us wherever we go, but it is surprisingly difficult to be aware of what is going on in our emotional lives. And there are reasons for that. And somebody shared with me this morning, he's reading a book that said that perhaps 85% of what's going on in our brains happens without our awareness. The brain is a powerful thing, but how this works is that in painful experiences in life, it's actually a merciful thing that is hardwired into our brains. In painful experiences in life, our brains have a way of, yes, remembering the pain of that experience, but our brains have a way of intellectualizing what happened to cause that pain and kind of storing it in a separate area. And it's a merciful thing because sometimes people go through things that are so painful that if they really felt all of that pain, they would just go crazy. They wouldn't want to go any farther. Do you know what I mean? There are some experiences in life where it's merciful that the human brain would just kind of shut off feeling and put the emotions somewhere else, and we would be able to intellectualize that painful experience. So maybe you've talked to somebody who was telling you about something really, really painful that happened to them, but they had no emotion on their face. You know what I mean? And some counselors would call it being cut off between your head and your heart. Their hearts were cut off, meaning they can talk about this horribly painful thing, but totally stoic, totally straight-faced. And they don't feel the emotion associated with that very, very painful memory. And in our honest moments, we would admit that that includes all of us. We all have emotional experiences, very painful experiences. But our brains, as a defense mechanism, as a coping mechanism, have helped us to intellectualize that. And it's kind of cut off our hearts. And we don't necessarily feel our feelings in those experiences, in those memories. We don't necessarily feel or acknowledge the emotion. I led a grief group at one time. There were maybe about 10 people in the group. And one of the participants was a lady whose adult son had committed suicide about 3 months prior. We were going around the circle and introducing ourselves and sharing why we're here in this group. Listen to what she said. She said, hi, gave her name, and she said, I'm here because my son committed suicide, 20-something son committed suicide about 3 months ago, and I thought after 3 months I would be over it. And now there was a collective gasp in the group. And when you're trying to provide some semblance of counseling to people, you try not to show shock on your face. You try not to show surprise, but it was probably hard for me to hide it. And I said something to her to the effect of, well, thank you for sharing that. And you've been through a tremendous amount of pain. And unfortunately, after 3 months, the grief process is probably just beginning. And it's easy to understand, though, even as shocking as that is, based on what we just said, it's kind of easy to understand why she would say that, isn't it? The intensity of that pain is so great that her brain, I think, was just trying to say, we just need to face forward and move ahead in life and just stay sane. You know what I mean? I think her brain was just trying to intellectualize this experience and protect her from feeling the flood of profound grief from that experience. Are you aware of emotion that you carry? Do you carry emotion that maybe your brain in trying to help you cope with this is kind of separated from the event? Do you carry emotion like that. And maybe that emotion could come up from time to time, but you're not even totally aware it's there. Maybe somebody says something and you have this reaction. You're not even sure why you had this powerful reaction. Well, maybe it's because some emotion is coming out that we were not aware of, but that's the first step in emotional intelligence. I've told this story before. Last week, I said I went to counseling when I was 18. Later, I went to seminary and they required counseling. It was an amazing experience for me. And I was a work in progress, still am. I made a lot of progress before seminary in my emotional health, but I still had a long way to go. And in the counseling session, the counselor asked me, Ryan, how do you feel? And I thought for a second, and I couldn't quite tell her. I didn't quite have words for my feelings. I couldn't name them. I couldn't label them. And so it's kind of embarrassing that she was nice about it, but she handed me a sheet of paper with like 20 or 30 feeling words on it. And it was like first grade, like see, spot, run. Like, okay, using this piece of paper and these feeling words, I want you to look and just pick some words and tell me how you feel. It was just embarrassingly difficult. I realized I'm not totally aware of how I feel at the present moment. I'm not able to monitor my emotion from moment to moment. So she gave me homework. She said, Ryan, several times a day, as often as you can think about it, I want you to just kind of stop what you're doing just for a minute and ask this question. And this would be a great thing to write down if this is something that you could use. How do I feel right now and why? This is something I've shared before, but we have a lot of new folks who maybe weren't here for that. How do I feel right now and why? So we're naming our emotion. We're using our sheet with the 20 or 30 feeling words. I feel angry. Okay. Now the second part is why? And what you do is you trace that feeling back. When did I start feeling angry? And you're looking for events, triggers in your life. Is this the first time I felt angry? Have there been other times when I felt angry like this? Maybe did something happen years ago? And it was the first time I felt this level of anger. You see the value of this? And like you're doing an investigation, you're retracing your steps. How do I feel right now? I feel stressed. Okay, why? Well, because this happened this morning. Well, did I feel stressed before then? Well, kind of. Did I feel stressed yesterday? Yeah. How about last week? Yeah. And maybe you're going back to, who knows? You can get pretty far back. Well, this thing happened in my life, and I kind of assumed this is what I had to do, and so I started feeling all kinds of anxiety and trying to perform and prove to somebody that I'm worth something, and I just always have this low-level stress. It's always there. Maybe that would be true of you. How do I feel right now, and why? That it's the first step in emotional intelligence to be aware of what's going on, and be cut off from your heart, but to be aware of what's going on. Once we're aware, we can move on to step 2, which is to manage those emotions. Now, awareness, if you could just get to awareness, you're doing better probably than most human beings. Most of us we miss the green lids. We go through many painful experiences in life, and we don't totally feel what's going on. And it's the root cause of much of the relational pain that we experience. But if you can get to number 2, wow, you're doing great. The management of emotions. I'm going to show you a movie clip, and I remember this movie coming out around 1998, probably. I went with a bunch of buddies of mine, and I laughed until I cried. And so we're going to see a clip of Bobby Boucher, water boy, played by Adam Sandler, and this is the very aggressive water boy of the school football team. And he goes to a class with a professor that looks remarkably like Colonel Sanders. And here is how not to manage your emotions.
Now, is there anyone here that can tell me why most alligators are abnormally aggressive?
I know the answer to this question. Raise your hand.
Anybody? Anyone? Yes or you, sir?
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Your mama said alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth and no toothbrush. Wow. Anybody else? Yes or you, sir?
Alligators are aggressive because of an enlarged medulla oblongata. It's the sector of the brain which controls aggressive behavior.
That is correct. The medulla oblongata.
Mama said...
The medulla oblongata is where anger, jealousy, and aggression come from. Now, is there anybody here can tell me where happiness comes from? No. Anyone? All right. Let's hear what Mama has to say on the subject.
Mama say that happiness is from magic rays of sunshine that come down when you're feeling blue.
Well, folks, Mama's wrong again.
No, Colonel Sanders, you're wrong. Mama's right.
Mama's right. Mama's right. Something wrong with his medulla oblongata.
It's okay to fight back. Coach Klein said I could. Mr. Coach Klein said I could. It's fine.
No, Colonel Sanders, yo, wrong. Love that line. Oh, my goodness. How not to handle your emotions. By the way, I think Colonel Sanders is wrong. Aggression does not come from the medulla oblongata. I think it's more like breathing and heart rate. Is that? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, we do have somebody who does know. Brandon Knuckles is a member of One Church, and he and his wife, Leah, are leading our trip to Nicaragua this summer. We really appreciate their efforts there. And Brandon's career requires a knowledge of how the brain processes emotion. And I invited him to come and just share for a few minutes about managing our emotions, how the brain works, and maybe some tips for how to manage emotion that we feel. So let's welcome Brandon. Come on up, man. Brandon Knuckles. Let's welcome Brandon. Thanks, man. Here's your mic. Thanks for being willing to share. I really appreciate it. The first question that I know is difficult for you to answer. It's very mysterious.
Follow Billy Madison.
Water, yeah, sure. Water boy.
Yeah, that was good.
I wanted to set you up for success, man.
But
I
appreciate it.
Here's what not to do, and then so no tackling.
Perfect.
During the,
Yeah, we won't get angry at each other.
So can you give us a quick overview of what you do for a living?
I would be happy to. I will do my best. My wife, one group friends, other friends tend to call me Chandler because no matter how many times I explain what I do, no one ever really gets it. So I'll try again.
Sure.
But we'll see how it goes. So I do design strategy for a large health services company. And really we focus on apps, technology, how people are engaging in their health. And so we're really looking at where design, communication, the brain, behavior, all of those and technology sort of intersect. So that's kind of where I sit.
Makes perfect sense, man.
Yeah, I thought
Thanks.
so.
So you're looking at human behavior and in a good way, kind of leading people through using technology, knowing,
Sure.
Predicting their human behavior. So what is one of the biggest barriers to emotional control and managing our emotions?
Well, so in Waterboy, you actually kind of just saw it, right? Unfortunately, it's the brain, right? So the brain is extremely fascinating. The brain has sort of your conscious part of your brain, but then there's this huge part that does most of the work that's called the cognitive subconscious. And that is on from like day one when you're born all the way to the end. And what it does is it basically is gathering data all the time, looking for how quickly can I respond to things, how quickly can I react to things, all with the goal of protecting the self, right? So it works really well, but it is building out these schemas and these patterns that are designed to help for that quick reaction, protect the self. So what's interesting is what you brought up earlier about the emotional issues and the emotional areas of our lives that have an impact on how we react to things. It's true because so your conscious part of your brain doesn't really have access to the cognitive subconscious because the cognitive subconscious doesn't operate in words or pictures or anything like that. It's all biochemical patterns, right? So what's interesting about as it's designing the schema, it's using emotional markers of how I'm going to react and respond to certain things. So a lot of times with the goal of protecting the self, it's awesome, right? So you step off a curb, you're going to cross the street and you see something out of the corner of your eye. What do? You jump back. You're back on the sidewalk, right? Fantastic. So if the conscious part of your brain was doing it, you'd step off the curb, you'd go, that kind of looks like a truck. The truck weighs more than me. If I got hit by the truck, I weigh less, so I'm probably going to get hurt. I should probably get out of the way. Maybe I'll step backwards. I got to step up off the curb because I did step down. That would take too long, right? That'd be bad news. So the cognitive subconscious part of your brain clicks in and you jump back, right? So awesome, awesome stuff. And it's all designed around protecting the self. What it also does is it also not only protects the self, but it protects the perception of the self that we have. So that's pretty fascinating. It goes to great lengths to do that. It will actually even distort reality for you so that you can maintain that perception of self that you have. Imagine this, right? Here's a great example. How many of you out there are the only good drivers on the road, and everyone else is a horrible
Absolutely.
driver.
Of course.
Right? Everybody. Thank you in the back. Yes. So that's kind of how that part of your brain works. It will distort reality so that it will maintain the perception of self that you have, which is awesome, but also so dangerous when you start to think about heated conversations where you feel threatened, where you maybe feel your family's threatened. How do you carry on a conversation in a logical, rational way when your brain is taking over, your cognitive subconscious is taking over, and you're supposed to think logically, rationally? I don't know about you guys, but I don't really do that when I start to feel threatened in a conversation or anything like that. Hard to think rationally and logically.
So the structure of the brain is such that it's meant to protect us.
Yep.
We just have this instant emotional reaction that's outside of our cognitive ability to say, oh, I'm doing this right now, I better dial it back.
Exactly.
It's meant to protect us, but often we allow it, or whatever happens, it goes too far and it causes problems for us. So what are some tips for how to interrupt that process, or try to master it, or
master it? I don't know about that, but
manage. There we go. There you go.
Step one is like what you're doing right now. The awareness part of it is huge. That alone is such a benefit, to be able to be aware of the fact that your brain is doing these things, because you have to make a conscious choice to actually recognize and appreciate that your brain is doing what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to protect you and protect your family and all of those good things, but you really do have to make that conscious choice and appreciate and be aware of what's going on in the background. So that's step one. The other one, there is actually a way, and you talked about it a couple months ago, there is actually a way.
Because I quoted you.
Awesome.
That's why.
Well, I was cool with somebody else, so it's fine.
All right, okay. All right.
There is a process that you can do to disrupt that whole threatened response scenario, right? And so it's a few-step process. I've actually tried it out a couple times, and it worked for me. So what happens when you normally start to feel threatened? Let's say you're in a heated argument, right? All of a sudden, when your body or when your cognitive subconscious starts to feel threatened, your body goes into fight or flight survival mode, right? So what happens? All of a sudden, the rest of your brain shuts down, the amygdala takes over, because that's what it's designed to do, and it is designed to protect you at all costs. Ergo, why you don't normally have logical conversations when you're starting to feel threatened, right? So what you need to do is disrupt that. How you do that is a few-step process. So step one, you adjust your posture, right? So you sit up straight. Because what happens when you start to feel threatened, right? You're hunched over. You might not even know it. You might get a little bit tense, right? So you disrupt it. Sit up straight. Are you feeling tense?
Why am I slouching right now?
Why are you sitting up straight? Are we
I'm really
tense?
self-conscious.
Okay, all right.
My amygdala is taking over.
So you sit up straight, right? And then you take a deep centering breath, like one that's not normal. So
I think we should practice this with you.
Should we? Is everybody feeling threatened, or should we just practice it for fun?
Yeah, I think we should just do it anyway.
We'll practice it for fun. All right.
I want to do it.
All right, let's do it. All right, so you sit up straight, adjust your posture. Then you take a deep centering breath, right? You're disrupting that normal breathing pattern. And then this one, obviously, you don't have to say it out loud, but you ask yourself an I wonder question. Could be anything. I wonder what I'm going to have for lunch. I wonder if moon dust would make me sneeze with allergies. Anything you want. It doesn't even matter, right? Ask an I wonder question. By doing that, you're actually accessing a different part of your brain that is not engaged at the moment because your amygdala is in control. So by asking that question, you are pulling some of the power out of the amygdala and getting it working on your brain. The next step you do is you make an observation. So I could observe the clock and go 10:57. I see that it's 10:57. That, accessing another part of your brain to be able to do that. All of a sudden, you are using the different parts of your brain and now can think and react and communicate logically because you have not given all power up to your amygdala, right? Very, very interesting and fascinating tool. Do I have 2 minutes to give an example?
Yes.
I got a great example.
Yes.
So this is how it went down. So that process came from a series by Dalton Kehoe. It's as awesome. It's like from York University. It's like an entire college course. My brother and his wife gave it to me. It's on CD. Talks all about the brain, communication, really fascinating stuff, right? And so I'm driving to work, and I work about an hour and a half away from my house, right? So awesome to have like CDs to listen to. I got plenty of time. So driving up, and this professor is talking about this process that we just went through. And I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. Like, I can't wait to like try that out. I really want to use it to see if it works. pull into the office parking lot. As soon as I pull into the office parking lot, it's about 9 a.m., my phone rings. My wife. Normally, she doesn't call me at that time. Probably not a good sign, right? So all of a sudden, my heart's like, I wonder if everything's okay. Pick up the phone, and she was at the gym. My son was in the daycare downstairs. And for those of you who know my son, Asher, this won't surprise you. He was trying to balance on a basketball. He's only 4, so he hasn't got that good at it yet. Falls off, smacks the back of his head. All of the daycare workers are freaking out. They bring Leah out of class, and they say, hey, he's crying really hard. You got to call an ambulance. You got to go get him a brain scan. His pupils look like they're not dilating. Panic. And she's telling me this on the phone. I'm an hour and a half away, right? And so she's talking to them, and she calls me, and I say, well, how's he acting, And she's like, well, we'll just take him to urgent care. So I'm like, okay. And so I'm like, I'll call you right back. And so I hang up, and we're trying to find an urgent care for her to go to that can do a brain scan, because apparently that needs to happen. And I'm an hour and a half away. So what do you think my first response is? I got to get there. I'm an hour and a half away, but I got to get there. My son's hurt. Protect the self, protect the loved ones, right? And so I go, holy cow. I almost said crap in church. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Holy cow.
People's amygdalas would go off. If you
It
did
would,
that.
oh, man.
Right.
Remember the technique. So anyway, I went, oh my gosh, I just heard this theory like 2 minutes ago, this process to think logically. Let's try it out. Great opportunity, right? So I do the process. I sit up straight. I adjust my breathing. I make an observation. I still remember the license plate I made the observation on, and ask myself an I wonder question. And then all of a sudden, within about a minute, I started to go, okay, let's think about this. So Leah said he's talking normally. He's not crying anymore. He's drinking. He's not throwing up. His eyes seem fine to her. By the time I even get down there, an hour and a half away, they'll probably have already seen the doctor, so I'm not going to do any good. They'll be done by the time I get there. If there is anything wrong, I can drive at that point and go meet up with them. Also, kind of freaked out about my son at the moment. I don't know if I should be driving an hour and a half erratically down the freeway. Just might cause more problems. So I said, okay, I'm just going to stay here, wait for the phone call, and see how everything is, and then make the decision at that point.
It's a great example.
And it worked.
It's a great example.
It worked. He ended up being fine. For those of you concerned, he is all right. But yeah, no brain scan needed. He was fine. But it was really interesting to be able to test it out, because you hear those things, you go, yeah, that sounds like it might work. But then when you try it out, I was really surprised that it actually worked. And it's not something that, it takes a lot of practice, right? Because when you get into heated conversation, all of a sudden you might freak the other person out, right? So it might get worse from there. But it's a process, right? And so just knowing those steps, knowing those tricks, knowing just the basic amount of how your brain works. I'm not like a neurologist by any means. I just have enough to get me up here at church to talk a little bit about it. But
It's good stuff. It's good
but
stuff.
just having a little bit of that knowledge, I think, goes such a long way and can be really powerful in helping to learn how to manage your emotions and just understanding how that brain works and how it responds.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much. Let's thank
Yeah,
Brandon.
absolutely.
Perfect, man. Great, helpful information. I'm aware, I manage, and then you're about to see me do a point in 2 minutes. Thirdly, I motivate myself by channeling emotions positively. The third step in emotional intelligence, to use emotion to motivate myself positively. Goleman calls this the master aptitude. The classic example is, I have to take a test and I'm really worried about the test. So the worry about the test, the anxiety that's not managed, right? If we have anxiety that's not managed, will cause me to do poorly on the test. And Goleman says the key to motivating ourselves is to use that anxiety constructively. That feeling the anxiety of that test coming would motivate us to study earlier for the test. So I manage that anxiety, what could be negative and cause me to just totally fail the test. I use it to motivate myself to study harder, and it will help me to get a higher test score. So now, what if it's not a school test? What if it's a marriage test? What if it's a parenting test? You think about the information Brandon shared. I mean, my goodness, we talk about heated discussions. We won't call them arguments, heated discussions. And how much damage has been done when we speak in the heat of the moment without having cognitive control over our emotional lives and where our amygdalas are dragging us. And what could we do when it comes to love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and faithfulness and self-control? how could those fruit of the Spirit change our relationships and raise our EQ if we're aware of our emotions, if we manage them the best that we possibly can, and we use emotion to motivate ourselves. I'm going to close with this story. There's a young lady named Kiani Putnam who walked in Pat's race, the annual race. It was a few weeks ago to honor Pat Tillman. And it's a 4.2-mile walk run, and a local news channel did a story on Kiani. There she is. There's a picture of Kiani. Now, Kiani made it her goal not just to walk in Pat's run, but to finish it. She wanted to finish the 4.2-mile walk. And for her, it was going to be very, very difficult. Now, for most young women, 4.2 miles is not going to be that difficult. But for Kiani, this would be very, very difficult. Well, here's why. There's another picture of Kiani. This is actually a picture of her finishing Pat's walk run. She has cerebral palsy, and she walked the 4.2 miles on crutches. She was not able to crawl or walk until she was 3 years old when the doctors performed spinal surgery on her. And when I saw this this report on the news, first of all, her smile, you see her smiling again there, and her sharing, she was honest about her pain. You could tell she didn't smile the entire time. She talked about her pain of dealing with this condition and the problems that has caused her throughout life. But then she was able to say, accomplishing this is going to be one of the greatest feelings of accomplishments I've had in a long time. And you see this bright smile on her face. She's feeling her emotions. She feels the pain, yet she's also able to smile and set goals and think about, well, here's who I want to be. Here's what I want to accomplish. And so I'm going to walk. I'm going to take steps toward that goal. And I think Kiani is a great picture of walking with the Spirit, of raising our EQ, going through that step-by-step process of walking with the Spirit and the techniques that Brandon was talking about, managing emotion, being aware of it, managing it, motivating myself with positive emotion towards growing, towards being better, towards walking with the Spirit. So what is it for you? Is there emotion that you're not always aware of? Or maybe something so painful happened that you've intellectualized it and you pushed it away. What's there? What emotion is behind what you do? How do I feel right now? And why? It could be a great homework assignment for some of us. And then once you're able to put a name, a label on that emotion, how do I manage it now? Understanding that our brains, as Brandon said, are hardwired, where there are a lot of emotional responses we have that they happen before we could even think cognitively about them. But we can learn new habits, new ways of dealing with our emotions, where we at least manage them and then channel them in a positive direction. That instead of letting this anxiety or this pain motivate me to be, depressed or to feel self-pity or to give up, I'm going to let this pain motivate me to walk with the Spirit and raise my EQ and share that with the people around me. And emotional intelligence can be contagious. What would that process look like for you? In your worship handout, there's actually a question. It's in the Connect card portion. It says, under next steps, it says, which step could you take to raise your emotional intelligence this week? 1, awareness. 2, managing. 3, motivating. What might that look like for you to walk with the Spirit this week?